Welcome to another program of Influence Today. I'm Dr. Terry Lyles. Chet Tart, my pilot, co-pilot, depending on who's doing what, is not available today. He needed some needful time off, and so he's off today. But I got a really special guest with me that I want to introduce. And as you can find us on all your podcast platforms, Influence Today. If for some reason you've not been there, you can also just uh, look up and Google Terry Lyles podcast, Chet Tart podcast. It all pops up. So glad to have everybody back in the seat again. Looking forward to this interview. So I've got a good friend of mine and a colleague and a very special person, Dr. John Li. I'm gonna let him tell a little bit about himself, but he's somewhat of a phenom. He won't say that about himself, so I got to tell a little bit about him. He's also a flight surgeon for the Air Force National Guard. He's a F-15 pilot. He flies other things as well, but he does a lot of things with the Air Force. He has
Make
two
that make that co-pilot.
co-pilot. Well, okay, so hey, it depends on who's got the stick that day, right? So
That's right.
co-pilot. Um, he has a business that he runs, Airtronics, which builds all kinds of really interesting things for the Air Force as well, which is really cool. So if you saw Top Gun Maverick, his levers and handles in the car that you see close-ups are what he designs with his teams, which is great. But why we're talking today is he's a very special surgeon in Palm Beach County, Jupiter, Florida, and he's worked with all kinds of people, or I should say, worked on all kinds of people who have hearing issues. It could be hearing loss, hearing improvement, hearing aid, stability. I'm gonna let him get into more of that as well. But literally, John is world renowned. I mean, there's only a handful or so of people in the country that can do what he does, and I'm gonna let him share a little bit more about that. But him and I started talking one day about Save America's Hearing, and he has a passion for this. And I'm gonna let him kind of share a little bit about what his passion is and why he and I are doing this together to really make an awareness of why hearing is such an important thing. And if we save it before we lose it, we don't need corrective issues and surgery like John does. So, Doc Lee, and your call sign is Jet Lee. So I'll call you Dr. Lee in this call, Jet Lee on other calls, but welcome to the program. And just give us a little more background of what I didn't mess up,
Oh,
and tell
no.
me what you do.
Thank you for the amazing introduction. Yeah, so I am a neuro-otologist, which is an ear doctor who subspecializes in a lot of the neuroanatomy. We do brain tumors that deal with the ear. We do dizziness, vertigo issues that deal with the nerves around the ear. So I do a lot of hearing restoration, cochlear implants. Terry was mentioning, there's certain implants that are limited to 10 centers in the United States, and we happen to be one of them, which is kind of cool.
Hmm.
So yeah, but to say it simply, I love the ear. For some reason, I just gravitated towards that. We do a lot of interesting research with that, surgery, and medical consultations. So
And you have a
yeah,
patent too. Let me just jump in. You have a patent on this vertigo thing with
right.
an
Yeah.
apparatus in your office. So tell us a little bit, 'cause I've seen it and I've been in it and I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool.
Uh, so So I do have a patent. It's on a balance force plate that kind of measures your balance and helps you get feedback on, which way you lean, left or right.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking Democrat or Republican. I'm talking about if you wobble when you try to stand still. And it's a kind of a cool invention. Nintendo actually came up after us and invented the Wii Fit, which is kind of
Sure.
very similar to it, but and it kind of gave us an opportunity to consult on that project. It was kind of fun.
Wow.
But anyway, yeah. So dizziness, vertigo, balance, and then hearing. So
That's awesome.
um, yeah.
Take a few minutes because I think it's fascinating. You and I talk on a regular basis about all kinds of interesting things. This is one of them, but explain a little bit how in a very simplified form for me and other people that could be listening, why hearing loss exists. I mean, what causes hearing? If you're not born with it, how do you develop hearing loss?
So funny you should ask, because this is something that's near and dear to my heart. Um,
Hmm.
everybody's born with about 15,000 hair cells, inner ear hair cells that
Hmm.
mediate hearing, and you've got 15,000 on each side. And I like to tell people, hey, you get to be the master of that, whatever you want to do with it, right? So if you had 15,000 hair cells, how would you spend them? Because over time, some of them are going to die on their own, but for the most part, they're pretty hardy cells, and it takes some active work to kill them. And so, do you want to hang on to your hair cells? Do you want to kill them? So, just by contrast, do you think the average person has somewhere between 100,000 and 150,000 hair cells, like the strands
Hmm.
of hairs on top of your head? And let's say you lost one hair per day. It
Right.
would be about 300 to 400 years before you lost every single hair. And the cool
Yes.
thing is your hair regenerates up here, right?
Hmm.
But your inner ear hair cells, they do not regenerate,
Wow.
right? So they're one and done. You lose one, they're gone. And so how you spend these is up to you. And the answer, I guess the question is, what kills off hearing? Well, yes, it could be viruses. Um, it could be a normal aging. It could be certain drugs that you take. Yes, you can knock out hearing with certain chemical agents. But
Hmm.
by far and away, the most deadly thing to your ears is loud noise. Your little ear pods, going to a concert, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so it's kind of interesting because OSHA, you've heard of OSHA, right?
Yes.
OSHA and NIOSH. OSHA regulates the amount of noise pollution your ears are allowed.
Hmm.
All right. Scientists have got together and said the magic number is between 80 and 85. So 85 is the magic number. 85 decibels is what it takes to start damaging your hearing. Anything below that, we're not too worried about. 85 or above, we regulate. So
Hmm.
OSHA says, hey, anything above 85 decibels, you're only allowed a certain number of hours exposure to that. Any more, then you got to stop. And it's OSHA is a balance of industrial regulation
Hmm.
and it's protection of your everyday worker, but it's also protection for the industry, because if they made it too tight, then nobody could work in an airport. Nobody could work at a machine shop. If they
Sure.
said, you know what, anything above 100 decibels, you can't work at anywhere. That won't work. You wouldn't have fighter pilots. You wouldn't have anybody who could,
Hmm.
uh, turn on a jet. So they have to play the middle, right?
Right.
So they came up with a formula, and I have to digress back and talk a little bit about decibels. So
Hmm. Please.
decibels is the unit of measure for hearing. So how loud something is. And for every 3 decibels, the hearing energy, the sound energy doubles. For every 10 decibels, it's 10x. For
Wow.
every 20, it's logarithmic. For every 20, it's actually not 20x, it's 100x.
Yeah.
And with 30 decibels, it's 1000x. So it's an extra zero for every 10 decibels. That's
Wow.
so imagine like a 1 foot wave, a 10-foot wave, and a 100-foot wave, or
Hmm.
a 10-pound kid versus I mean, a 10-pound kid, a 100-pound kid versus a 1,000-pound rhinoceros sitting on your shoulder or
Hmm.
something like that. You
Right.
know,
Right.
so there's a so the numbers escalate quite a bit, and the way that OSHA and NIOSH is another regulatory governing body that's a little bit more scientific, and it's a little bit more reasonable for industrial sound. Says that 85 decibels we start to regulate, and NIOSH says 8 hours for 85 decibels. When you go up to 88 decibels, which is twice as much sound
Hmm.
energy, 88 every 3 decibels is doubles. At 88, you're allowed 4 hours. And then at 91, which is three on top of that, you're allowed 2 hours. And then and so on and so forth. So you kind of see the progression.
Yes.
So that the
Wow.
idea is that the sound energy, if you're doubling the sound energy, you're decreasing you're having your exposure to it.
The
Okay.
lapse time. Yeah,
Yeah,
that it's so powerful. And I want to say something just real quick because I remember as a kid going to concerts.
yeah.
Um, my ears would ring for a day
Oh yeah.
after a concert, and I just thought, well, I guess this is everybody was there. There's like 5,000 people there, and but my ears would, and it would eventually go away. So I probably killed a lot of what
Well,
I have, and I did radio for decades with cans on and the music and a lot of people in the radio, not so much in the TV space because most of them are mic'd up and hear through speakers, but a lot in the radio podcast world you mentioned. And I also want you to talk a little bit about not just but concerts, churches, auditoriums, anybody who is playing louder music than what you're talking about is pretty alarming. And that's part of what we're trying to do is say, listen, we just try to educate people on you can still have the same experience, just turn it down a little bit.
right. So that yeah that so I'm working my way over there. The answer is that there has been a huge increase in volume of
Hmm.
at churches, at entertainment venues and stuff like that. Um, it's sort of like the problem is that you don't know that you're losing hair cells. You just mentioned that you came home from a concert and your ears are ringing,
Yes.
or you're temporarily deaf for a while. Like you know,
Yes.
you've seen those movies where the bomb explodes and then
Right.
the screen, everything's running around, but there's no sound. And then
Correct.
the no sound is replaced by a and this little tennis thing. That is exactly what happens to your ear when you slam these little hair cells and you beat them up. They go into it's like a knockout, right? A Mike Tyson knockout. They don't work for a minute, and then when they work, they don't work right, and so they send a sound when there is no sound, or don't send a sound when there is a sound, right?
Wow.
So every time you've had one of those events where your ears are ringing or you're temporarily deaf, you've killed off some hair cells. You have you've taken your
Right.
15,000 allotment and you've decreased that number. So
Wow.
as and I was saying, like with your hair, maybe 300 or 400 years. With your inner ear hair cells, if you lost one a day, you would be completely devoid of hair cells by the time you're 41, right? And by the
Wow.
time you're 20, half of them are going to be gone. So if you lost one hair cell a day, right? So
Right.
fortunately, they don't just plain die by themselves. It takes some active killing to do that,
Right.
and noise is where it is. So they've discovered that anything above 85 decibels starts to kill off hair cells. So if you're
Wow.
listening below that, you're not killing off hair cells. You're listening above 85, now you're starting to damage something. They've done studies on rats and mice and chinchillas and stuff like that, and guitar fish, weird animals. They expose them to loud sounds, and at 100 decibels, at a certain frequency, they blasted mice for 2 hours, just 100 decibels, right? Most churches are above 100 decibels, but you
Mhm.
blast them for 2 hours, they dissected them and they found a bald spot at that frequency. Basically, they saw almost 100% of the outer hair cells dead after 100 decibels for 2 hours. All right, now that's in mice. So
Right.
but there's some applicability to humans. So there are studies where humans have completely lost their hearing, even at 120 decibels um, sound exposure. Okay.
And that is so interesting and alarming at the same rate. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because sound blasts in the military, you're aware of being in the military, and I do a lot of post-traumatic stress. A lot of the CTE and post-traumatic stress is due to sound blast, sound wave, not
Mhm.
necessarily legs lost. It's the sound from being close enough to a bomb where it literally moves your brain around and gives you, if you will, a concussion that has to recover from it. And I don't think the average person realizes how much sound plays an effect on everything that we do unless you lose it. Like anything in life, if you lose something, you don't know what you have until you lose it. And
That's true.
I know you do miracles literally in surgery, helping people get some part of their hearing back. And I've seen people. I know you work on rock stars. You work on people that have had serious ear issues and you work with them. So what do we do? What is this awareness about? I know it's getting a message out. It's
Yeah.
too loud. protect your ears. What is the mission of what you want to do to really say, hey, here's what we're after. We don't want you to not
Yeah.
listen to music and not go to
Right, right.
church,
No,
not go to concerts, you know?
right, right. Well, so the mission is obviously to raise awareness, and I
Mhm.
think people just don't know. Like, uh, yeah,
Yeah.
people sit. You're talking about a bomb blast. Everybody says, okay, fine, I can get a bomb blast will make me deaf. I'll go listen to bomb blast. That's a big deal. But what about the music that's just insidiously getting louder and louder?
Yes.
And no, they don't seem to understand why that happens. So I like to paint an analogy. Like the cochlea is kind of like a snail shaped thing, right? So
Mhm.
imagine that the snail shaped um, channel is filled with little docks. Like imagine the Jupiter inlet,
Mhm.
is shaped like a snail, and it's lined with beautiful docks, and the waves come in and undulate them and tickle certain frequencies, and you hear those frequencies, and it's a wonderful thing. So the waves are good, they're not too big, and the docks way the boats in the docks just move up and down, and it plays a nice piano music for you, just from the waves moving. You sort of understand
Mhm.
the analogy.
Yep.
And now a tsunami comes in, right? It comes in and it wipes out all the docks and the boats that are in that inlet.
Mhm.
As
Mhm.
it makes the turn, the energy dissipates and it gets less and less as it goes around the circle, around the curve of the cochlea. But the maximal point of damage is really right at the end of that channel, right?
Okay.
So
Yep.
that is why when people have loud noise exposure, their hearing loss peaks at 4,000 hertz, because at 4,000 hertz, that's the end of that channel, and that's where that tsunami hits. And so I think it's important for people to be able to visualize that. So part of my campaign is to actually build some videos to show why we care about our hearing, and what parts are being damaged, because people don't realize that. Like that 2 hours of 100 decibel music
Right.
can just make that little area bald. It just kills it,
Yeah,
right?
let me ask you something that I've been questioned about, not just specifically to this, but in general, of what is the impact of wearing earbuds all day? Is there
Uh,
any impact? Because the ear has to breathe, I think, right? So, I mean, I don't know. Just
uh,
talk a little bit about, because everybody wears earbuds today.
Okay, so you're sort of asking what is the mechanism of our hearing loss, really?
Mhm.
Because no, the ear does not need to actually breathe. But again, anything below the 85 decibels, we're not that worried about. Anything starting to go above 85, we care about. Well, and it's a continuum somewhere between 80 and 85. So it's the cumulative damage. So if you're leaving your earbuds in for 24 hours at a time, you are accumulating damage. Here's a way of thinking about it. First of all, the ear is completely fascinating, and I want to talk about hidden hearing loss in a little bit, but let me briefly tell you why
Sure.
accumulated music makes a difference. So when you stimulate your hair cells, it's a biochemical reaction where the hair cell says, "Hey, I heard something." It releases some uh, glutamate
Hmm.
out into the cell space, and then it's absorbed or recognized by the next cell over. That's how one cell talks to the other cell. It says, hey, here's some glutamate. And the other one says, oh, thank you for the glutamate. I'll process it. And it's sort of like a waterfall, like water comes in, water goes out, right?
Hmm.
If you produce too much glutamate, right? Super loud noise, a flood of glutamate comes in. The receptor part says, hey, that's way too much. I can only take a certain amount at a time. Then you flood the system. When you flood the system, that glutamate turns into glutamic acid, and it burns up the fibers and it kills them,
Wow.
right?
Well,
Sort of like, you know, uh, uh, our towns and cities only take so much rainwater before it floods away.
right.
So if it rains a little bit, the ground absorbs it. We're all happy. No big deal. But if it rains so much that the ground can't absorb it, then it creates a flood and wipes things out. So when you flood your ears all day long with glutamic acid, you're going to eat away at the little synapses, the little connections between the cells. Which
Wow.
leads me, that's just one way. The other is the actual trauma on the hearing cell. So you get
Hmm.
hearing cell trauma, and then you have this, we call it excitotoxicity. excitotoxicity when the glutamic acid burns up your synapses, which leads me to something called hidden hearing loss. And this is actually the biggest thing that nobody knows about. Most people, nobody knows about, because when you have hidden hearing loss, you pass your hearing test. Everything looks normal, but you are impaired. And how are you impaired? It's because of it's called cochlear synaptopathy. Big words. What does that mean? Each hair cell that hears has anywhere from 10 to 20 to 10 to 15 to 20 extra other cells that connect to it. And it's sort of like it would be sort of like going to going to a press meeting, and you have a dozen reporters taking down everything that's being said, and some people are going to spin it one way and some people is going to spin it another way. So like imagine like if you can tell the difference between a violin, a note, let's say C sharp, played by a violin versus by a flute versus by a clarinet. It could be the same exact tone, yet you know that that was a violin, or you know that that was a clarinet. How do you know that? Because of the different reporting sequences from each of these little nerves, right? So each cochlear inner ear hair cell has about 15, let's say, reporters talking to it that helps shape what that sound really is, makes it rich, makes it more understandable, instead of just, oh, that's just a C sharp, right? So if a couple of those, and there are fast fibers and there's slow fibers and there's quick, if you kill off some of the soft fibers, then when you hear it, you just detect the sound and you don't know the quality of it. What that affects is your speech understanding score, right? So it's, I hear something, but I don't understand what I'm hearing. I can't tell that that's a violin. I can't tell that there are two people talking. I can't tell that he said, you know, it's Wednesday out instead of it's windy out, because you just heard wah, 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 like, kind of like Charlie Brown, right?
Right.
But you can pass your hearing test by listening to Charlie Brown. You heard the sound, you hit the button, and boom. So it's considered hidden hearing loss, because you have hearing loss, right? You have hearing loss, but nobody knows about it. The doctor doesn't know about it because you passed the test. You don't know about it because, like, yeah, I heard that. I heard that. I hit the button. I was good, right? But you don't. No one says, hey, was that a flute, or was that a violin, or was that something? How do you measure that? That's hard, right? And so that's what we are killing. Every time you've gone to a concert, you've had that ringing in your ears and stuff like that. You've glutamic acided out a bunch of hair cells, synapses, and you have hidden hearing loss.
Right.
And as we get older, we accumulate all this to the point where I don't know what you're saying anymore. I heard you garble. I don't know what you said. So
and
it's really annoying.
Is frightening. I think, I worry about our young people that still, like I did, maybe you did. I mean, we always used to blast music, but we didn't really have earbuds then. We didn't use hearing protection. We had boom boxes and loud concerts and churches and auditoriums, and that's all good. But now, I mean, I've had earbuds in before where something would click off and it would flip it into another audio part, and it was so loud I would rip them out of my ears.
Yeah.
Because it literally feels like a nail going through my brain.
Yeah.
And it's frightening, because I'm like, and then you feel that pounding for 5-10 minutes after that. It was like a millisecond.
Okay. I just want everybody to know that we didn't plant you to ask me these questions, but
no, it's what happens to me. That's why I want you to talk about it.
You're nailing all the things, because what you're talking about is called hyperacusis. So what's really interesting is that when you damage something, two things happen. It becomes less sensitive.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it becomes hypersensitive. Think about that, right? Wow. So you lose hearing, your hearing becomes less sensitive because you can't hear it as well. But yet when you do finally hear it, it's hypersensitive. So like the old joke goes, like when you're talking to your grandma, it's like, hey, grandma. Oh, you start out whispering, say, hey, grandma. And she's like, nothing. Hey, grandma. Nothing. Hey, grandma. Hey, quit shouting. So it's like they don't get it until they hit that threshold, and then it's too loud.
Yeah, then it's too loud.
But think about hyperacusis. Hyperacusis is one of the victims, one of the results of this loud noise stuff, loud music stuff that we're experiencing. And think about it, it is like a black and blue mark. Think about a
Yeah.
black and blue mark. So you're fine, you're doing great. You whack your knee really hard, and now you have a black and blue mark in
Yeah.
there. And every time you touch it, ow, that hurts, right?
Yes.
So if
Yes.
you whack your hearing, then it becomes less sensitive. But when you hit a certain threshold, bam, it hurts. And so it's like, ow, and you want to pull it out of your ear. So,
It's amazing.
right. So not only, the
Yeah.
loud music results in hearing loss, hyperacusis, and then there's one more big thing. It's tinnitus, ringing of the ears. So, and
Yes.
that's when you hear sounds that aren't there. Basically, um, the movie show the bomb blast goes off, and then you get the ringing of the ears
Right. Right.
because that cell, at first was in a coma, then it wakes out of the coma and says, "Hey, what did I miss? Maybe I should be sending a sound." It's just crazy how that works.
I've worked with people, Doc, that literally said I was at the point of taking my life because this noise would never go away. In their
So,
sleep, in their wake time. I'm a psychologist by trade, but I've heard some really interesting stories with that were people that had either sound blasts, like we talked about from military, overexposure to radio, TV, with pads years ago. We didn't even understand what you're talking about a long time ago because, that's just not what I did. But after a while, you started hearing these patterns. You're like, wow, man, we're really doing some serious damage. So we're going to wrap up in a minute because we're going to have to do more of these. I mean, you're fascinating and we could do this all day. How
yeah.
did people, this is Influence Today. I'm Dr. Terry Lyles. This is my co-pilot pilot today. He's my pilot today because he's flying with the conversation. Dr. John Li, which is spelled Li. How do they find you? Your website? What's the best way to reach you if people want to reach out directly to you as we get our site going now? And we'll talk about more of that before we finish.
Probably for this purpose through your site, or I
Okay,
mean, we have
perfect.
we have a website called drlee.net, and it's dr-li.net.
Okay.
But
Just in
yeah,
case, because somebody may want to reach out directly to you, they can find me at terrylyles.com. They're used to hearing
yeah,
this on our regular listeners, terrylyles.com.
yeah,
And then we have saveamericashearing.com that we're building now.
right,
So if
right.
you don't see it yet, hey, keep checking back, but get a hold of me at terrylyles.com. And as we wrap up, Doc, I want to thank you for your passion for just health. I mean, I can't even state, nor would I, how many times I've called you and said, "Hey, man, I need some help." And you've been
Happy to.
gracious enough to be there and get us to other people. And it's such a doctor privilege to have a relationship with people like you. And I think we're going to do something really, really amazing by just doing this as getting the information out there and making it a reality that our hearing matters from our young people to our parents and grandparents to ourselves. And we're going to keep doing this, keep talking. So thank you for the conversation today. Any final thoughts that you have before
Yeah,
we jump out of this one?
yeah. Probably for the next time. How did I get to this passionate level?
I love it.
Tons of stuff, right? My patients are coming in by droves saying church is too loud, this venue is too loud. They're leaving certain places because of this loudness, and the people who they're leaving don't realize it, right?
No,
So
and I'm so glad you said that because that was a great segue and a baiting for what we'll talk about next time because that is exactly how you and I started talking about this. You started talking one day on a meeting you and I were in, and it's like all these people come to me and they're like, it's so loud. I mean, can we turn it down? And I don't have earbuds with me all the time. I don't even have my glasses with me. I need readers at times. They're in the wrong room. They're in the wrong pair of clothes.
yeah,
It's like you almost need to have them patched to you. And I've had a lot of hearing issues on racetracks. That's a whole nother issue. The
that's a whole
hearing.
other thing. Yeah,
I mean, you can't hear yourself think with earbuds in.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's a lot of people that are experiencing that and don't realize it. So, Doc, I'm going to have you back on. Really appreciate your time. So, you want to know more information for now? TerryLyles.com. SaveAmericasHearing.com is coming. Dr. John Li, my friend, colleague, uh, you know, pilot. Thank you for your service for the Air Force, what you do in saving people's lives every day and doing this that you're so passionate about. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This is Influence Today. Chet Tart's off today. I'm Terry Lyles. This is Dr. John Lee. We'll see you soon.